Welcome to the Innovation in Higher Education podcast, where we share the diverse views and perspectives of experts in higher education, innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship from all around the world on topics related to the future of higher education and the future of work in an engaging, fresh, friendly, and very human format. Let's get started. Welcome to a new episode of the Innovation in Higher Education podcast. My name is Viviana Rojas. I am the director of Digitalmente, and as usual, I will be your host for today. Today's topic relates to entrepreneurship in higher education, and our guest is Shaunak Roy. Shaunak is an edtech entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of Yellowdig. Yellowdig is a community-driven active learning platform whose mission is increasing student engagement through transforming every classroom into an active, social, and experiential learning community. Yellowdig has already been adopted by over 130 colleges and universities, K-12 schools, and corporate training clients across the US and the world. Related to Shaunak's background, he is graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering from IIT Bombay and completed his graduate studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Prior to founding Yellowdig, Shaunak spent a decade advising global companies on technology, strategy, and growth. So let's give him a warm welcome. Hi, Shaunak. How are you doing today?
Vivian, great to be here. Thank you. Doing great.
Thank you for your time and for coming to this interview. We are very happy to have you here on the podcast. So I want to know about Yellowdig. Tell us a bit about the story of the company, how it started, what were your motivations when you first put the first rock of the startup.
Okay, so Viviana, so it's been 8 years. I founded Yellowdig back in 2015. Mm-hmm. And my journey was, as you said, I did my engineering background, and I spent about a decade in various roles in the corporate sector. I was a consultant. Then I took a role at a company where I lived close by in corporate development. But all the while, I was always looking for an opportunity to start a company. It so happens Yellowdig is my third company. Two of them, the first two I started when I was a student. And both were, I would say, failures in the parlance of startups, but it was great learning for me. And behind the scenes, as I was going through my corporate roles, I always kind of really wanted to experience that again. What I experienced when I was an entrepreneur, in campus as a student. So, long story short, 2015, I decided to finally kind of really take the plunge, in that sense, and start a company. And two things I kind of hold near and dear to me. So one is I love building digital products, kind of thinking about user experience and kind of really solving problems using technology. The other passion I developed that time was kind of really around learning. And I thought that, I did a little bit of digging. I didn't come from an education space, but I came from that idea that I was a student myself, and I spent about 10 years in the corporate world. I could see how people learn and how they do not learn sometimes. So all of that together came the idea of Yellowdig, which is what you said. It's a learning platform which drives engagement through creating engaging learning communities, which are experiential in every learning environment. So, yeah, that's how it started. It's 8th year. I've seen many things that work. I've seen a lot of things that do not work as an entrepreneur. So happy to share whatever would be interesting to you.
I am mainly interested in your relationship with higher education institutions. So tell me about how has been your experience as an entrepreneur coming from the corporate sector, which is completely different than the academic sector. So how has been this shift? How was your journey working in the field of higher education and with higher education institutions? Did you find any barriers, any challenges?
Yeah, so higher education, as you know very well based on your background, is a very interesting kind of sector to work with, which is quite different from corporates. And then there are good and bads in every sector. So the good thing that I found about higher education is that they're very inviting to have conversations. So when I started the company, when I had my first version of the product, which if I had taken to a company at that point, and which I did, by the way, it was almost impossible to have them use the product because companies typically have a lot of barriers for small, young companies. They cannot even get through in terms of security and other things. So big companies work with big organizations typically. But higher education, I found, was quite open to actually try things. So a friend of mine who was a professor at University of Pennsylvania, which is where we are based, in Philadelphia, he was very open to give it a try. And once he gave it a try, there were many other people that I met through him who also used the product and gave us very valuable feedback, and which I would say was what drove me to start the company once I got some good feedback that, okay, this product can actually work. So that was really good part of it. So the openness, the intellectual curiosity, professors are very smart. They can give you real interesting feedback around product features, where things go. Um, the challenging part we ran into was, as you know, higher education is almost like a bureaucracy. Like, there are, for them to buy new technologies, there are no one decision maker. Even if you get a few faculties use a product, love a product, but very often they cannot make the decisions. You have to go through the IT teams who has to approve it. There are regulatory teams like accessibility FERPA who has to also kind of review and approve it. Then you have budget owners who are quite different from the teachers who are, who have their own initiatives in place. So the decision-making process is quite complicated. And unless somebody has a good understanding how things work, it might be challenging to actually get deals done, which, as you know, is important for companies. So I would say that's kind of the basic thing I've noticed in higher education. The other thing I would also add to it is that even I have been, in higher education for 8 years now, which is, before the pandemic and after the pandemic, I do see a pretty significant shift now um, in higher education, especially in the last year and a half, since colleges have come back now to, full action, right? Because during the COVID times, it was quite mixed, right? Some colleges were struggling, others were doing fine. But now I do see that there's a lot more openness in terms of working with companies like us to solve big problems in education. As you know, there are many challenges in education and we have to all work together. So the openness I see now is something that we have not seen probably 7, 8 years back.
Definitely. I totally agree with you that after COVID, there has been a shift in the mindset of higher education institutions. I believe that they actually saw, experienced, like how the world has changed and the new needs, not only of students, but of society in general. So I actually think, and I always say that the pandemic, although it was really bad in general terms, it also brought good things, especially in relation to the transformation of higher education institutions. No? So, um, going back to the first point about the bureaucracy and this barrier that you found as an entrepreneur, trying to work with higher education institutions, how do you solve it? How have you managed it?
Yes. So, in terms of, kind of working through the various, bureaucratic channels, right, in a school for us to get essentially after we had enough traction to get a deal done. Initially, it was persistence to be able to kind of really work that process through. What we would think sometimes will take us, 3, 4 months, might take us a year.
Mm-hmm.
It could take a long time. So we had to kind of really not give up. As an entrepreneur, as you know, it's not only just about higher education, but building anything new is quite challenging, and especially for new products and technologies to be accepted by the market is not easy. So kind of not being able to give up is an important thing for anybody trying to start a company or a new product or anything new in the world. But higher education probably, challenges that even more in
You have to
entrepreneurs.
be you have to be ultra resilient.
You have to be, yes, very, very resilient. I mean, that's the feedback I've got from many people that, yeah, we have been resilient, and I think others who have been kind of successful in this space have had to do that. So that's number one. I would say just be prepared to kind of really push for it and stick to it, whatever you build. So, which goes to the point that it's important to build things that you truly believe in, because if there are products that you don't believe in, in some other industries they may be able to sell, but in higher education it's very difficult because it takes that persistence. The second thing I would say is that for us to navigate the challenge, one of the really good things I am very proud of that I did early on is to hire people who came from higher education. As a technology entrepreneur, sometimes it's very easy to get kind of lost into your own achievements, where you say, "Oh, I have a great product. It has all these nice features, and it can do all these wonderful things, futuristic." But at the end of the day, the users are from in a very unique experience. They come with a very unique perspective in higher education. So having team members who has that perspective and be able to communicate that perspective to the clients or the users, and also get feedback from them so that the product can improve over time is extremely important. And that's something I think we kind of realized early on after a few initial kind of maybe false starts. Then definitely, there are team members like Brian Vidine who joined us as our client success in the client success organization, came from that background. He has a PhD in psychology, and then came with a teaching background associated with the School of Education at University of Delaware. And I so happens I came across him through a common connection, and we ended up hiring him. And that kind of really led to a path where we brought in more members with that kind of background. That definitely has helped us to be able to kind of have that relationship with higher education institutions.
I think what you did there was something very smart, because I think that higher education institutions trust more the companies that have higher education, like people that come from higher education there, because it's all about relationships at the end, and connections. But I have one question here. Did you have did because you are bringing people that come from academia and from academic backgrounds to work in the startup ecosystem, which is completely different and works at a completely different speed. I mean, especially talking about speed. Did you have to make like a special training for them, or they already came, with all the mindset and all the and all the skills and the skills required to go into entrepreneurship? Because as well, entrepreneurship is a very demanding field. You have to be there. It's almost like a marathon.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So now when we hire people from academia or pretty much any other field, we have a training program so that they understand what exactly is to be being in a startup. When I have conversations with them and we do the interviews, we make it clear that sometimes the culture is different, that what you might be used to. And that could be slightly challenging, for people who have come from a, let's say, higher education background. But what we have found is there are two things that I've found, which is, this mindset to be in a growing company where you are kind of more aligned with the mission of the company, as opposed to working in a big Fortune 500 where you're just doing a role, right? So that difference, there are people who has that natural mindset. They come from all walks of life. There are a lot of them are in higher education. Maybe they're in a teaching job. They're quite bored in that teaching job. They just want to have a, much more impactful work, and finding those people. So, one of the other hires we did, he came from a teaching background, and he has been a teacher for 15 years. And when we first spoke to him, the first thing he said is that, "Oh, I have been looking for a product like this for the last 15 years. I wish I had it. I could have been a better teacher. And I also tried to build this product myself. That didn't quite work out." So that was a very strong indication for us that, okay, this person would be really passionate in what we are building and probably willing to go the extra mile. And he has been with us for almost like 4 or 5 years now. So I think it's a matter of finding the right people. No matter what industry, you have to always find people who have the right mindset, especially in this phase of a company. The other thing is, I do see that, if there is a strong alignment of passion and mission, where people coming from higher education has been really willing to solve this problem, they working for a company that's solving the problem, is actually quite motivating, than being in higher education and not being able to do much about it. As you know, sometimes there are a lot of people in higher education who have been purely clearly frustrated because there hasn't seen much change in the last like 50, 100 years. So they get in an opportunity with a company to make that change happen is definitely drives them. So yeah, so I think it's very much, and one of the things I do say is that if you are running a company in higher education, look at talent in higher education. I
Yeah.
think that is one of the really great talent pool to hire from, and maybe kind of filter them, as you said, train them up to roles in the company.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because as well, higher education, I mean, for people who are not working in the field of higher education, for people who are not inside a university, um, higher education is like a black box, no? It's like enigma because we usually like normal people, I mean, we all go, I mean, not all, but we go to university, that's a path of life, but we don't actually see what happens inside a university, how the universities function, and once you are in, then a new world appears in front of your face, and then you can see that it's a very special field, with very special needs, as you say, and with very special characters as well, and it's a very particular culture. And one of the particularities of the higher education culture is that it's global, so it doesn't matter from which country you are. There are similarities. That's something crazy that I noticed. I come from Peru, and I worked in higher education in Peru, and I noticed that the culture is the same here in Europe. I mean, it has, of course, slight differences, but the base is the same. And as well, I've met and I've known higher education institutions from, I don't know, India and China, and the culture is the same. So I think that's a very particular thing about higher education institutions. It shares a global culture, the academic culture, and I really like your approach of getting people that come from this culture to your company because they really know the pains, really
Hmm.
know the opportunities as well, and really know um, how to get people from higher education interested in something innovative and new as your product. As well, the shift to improving the learning experiences of its students have become more relevant than ever. So definitely your product is more relevant than ever at the moment. So it's actually for best interest of higher education institutions to start experimenting with new products and new allies and partners like yourself and your company, right?
Yes.
Um, Related to the second thing you said, and coming back to a bit of how higher education has changed after COVID, and how as well your relationship with higher education has changed after COVID. Would you say that now you see more openness and more people are coming to you from higher education institutions after COVID than before COVID?
Um, yes. So I think what COVID has taught us, which is, as you know, the whole world has changed in many ways. Work has changed where people are very comfortable work from home or a few days a week to
Mm-hmm.
work from home. And companies have put in, policies and practices to make it work. And some companies actually see increased productivity as part of that new shift. Employees are
Mm-hmm.
happier and, people are more productive, which is a win-win in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing is happening in higher education too, which is, people are starting to realize that, people can learn in ways which is not always what they thought is the only way learning happens, which is go in a classroom, sit there for 45 minutes twice a week, and then you write an exam, and that's how learning happens. People have realized that online technologies like Zoom and Teams and so many other, like Yellowdig and others, can actually fill the gap where people can connect with one another, share ideas, ask questions, learn from anytime, anywhere, from any device, um, within their lives. So, people have now lives, they have families, jobs, child commitment, partner commitment. There's so many things that happen in life. So it provides more flexibility. And I think this concept was always there before COVID, which is why we saw growth in online learning. But I think during COVID, a large portion of higher education and our society in general saw that in action, that they could see that things actually work and it didn't fall through. And since COVID, what we are finding is that there is a more acceptance. So as you know, in higher education, there are people who are for innovation, and there are a group of people, I mean, traditional, people
that
who
are
have come,
against innovation.
yeah, against, against the status quo, right? I mean,
Yes,
for the status quo, like why
for the
change some
status quo. Yeah,
exactly, why
against
change
change. Yeah.
against change? And we all know that change is hard, right? Like in any organization. So but the two things I see, the more people are now for innovation, especially at a senior level, like, when we talk to provosts or presidents, we often find them very interested in experimenting with new things that they would never think about experimenting in the past, and put resources behind it. So that pie has, of course, increased within the overall pie in higher education. And the other thing is, people are now serious about change too, where we are seeing more professional training in institutions. Like in our case, we do a lot of training of instructors who use our technology to make sure that they use our product properly and they get the right results. We are seeing that more uptick of that. A lot of people are coming to us and asking about those resources, really trying to understand deeply about how our product works, as opposed to kind of viewing it as a technology that we have to deal with somehow, or the IT team deals with it. So they themselves are taking active role, the educators. So definitely there's a lot of change. And the other thing is also happening is a lot of educators have also seen that this is a future. Um, Now, I think if anybody wants to be in teaching in the next 5-10 years, they do realize that they cannot just do what they have been doing. So the change is coming, and then why don't be the early adopters and be the leaders in that new change, as opposed to kind of waiting and be a late adopter. So a lot of people are starting to be the early adopters of technology, which is great to see.
Yeah, I agree, especially with what I saw recently, in the beginning of the year, with the rise of ChatGPT, is that now they're like, now they have pressure on. And I really like, especially in the case of ChatGPT, I really like how it kind of got viral, and it got so viral that it even got into higher education professionals that usually are not very much into technology, but now that, like, they're actually making bigger steps. And I think, as you said, everything is pointing to that direction, and the change is coming. Now the question is, how long it will take, and will it be fast enough?
Yeah.
Um, what do you think about this? Do you think it
You
will be
know,
fast enough?
we all hope that it'll be fast, right?
Yeah.
Because, if it's not fast, then it feels like, some institutions will be left behind. And, students are increasingly going to be left behind as well, because, like, unless we use technology, there's so many, and the cost of education is what it is. Like, it's just gets very hard to justify for a lot of learners, saying that why would I go to a college where not only I'm not getting the flexibility with technology, but I'm also paying more and more cost, because technology is actually is an enabler for reducing cost
Hmm.
in many ways. So you can actually reduce cost of education using technology smartly. So there's so many levers one can pull. So in my mind, it comes down to leadership, because, you know, kind of change is expensive and difficult anywhere, and especially in higher education. So schools that are going to prioritize this change as a leadership agenda and be very serious about it and drive that change are going to be the ones which are going to win, in this
Agree.
space. So I think it's slowly coming, and we are seeing that happen. We are seeing that many senior leaders are getting very interested. They're attending our demo webinars, and in the past, we will sometimes see that a lot of them would not show up. They will just kind of send somebody, but now they are actually attending these webinars, asking questions, and engaging with companies like us, which is really great to see. So it is happening, and I think we need to just kind of keep this voice up, so that people realize that it's not that difficult, though, if we can work, form those partnerships where we can actually work with institutions and make it much more easy for them to go through that change.
I agree with you. I have one more question for you. Do you work mostly with public institutions or with private institutions?
We have a mix. So we work with, now we work with over 150 universities. So public, private, for profit, community colleges. all across the board. The difference is for private institutions, especially for profits. We have for profit clients too. The decision making is a lot more centralized, so that once you make a change happen, in one segment of the school, you can now implement it very fast for the rest of the university. For public institutions, typically it's a slightly slower process where each department or faculties make their own choice because of academic freedom. So the adoption curve is slightly different, but we are seeing very similar adoption. And another important thing is that we are seeing a lot of students are now advocating for technology. Like, we have, it's a very fortunate thing for us, but sometimes we hear from our students or faculties is saying that students are now saying that they would want to take a class with our product because that provides them better experience. So I think the student voice, which probably in the past wasn't that important, but now is getting more and more important in the decision-making process, because if students want something, they want technology, and if they are really advocating it, I think that's the best way of adopting something.
That's a really nice bottom-up approach on change. That it comes from students. It's really. I think it's going to be effective because especially because students are the ones who drive the demand. But I was asking this question exactly because of what you answered. I wanted to see if there was a big difference between the times that it takes for you to implement the change or to implement the product or to build a relationship between private and public institutions. Because from the experience I've had and from experiences I've heard, is what you say is exactly true. In private health institutions, especially the ones that are for profit, decisions are more centralized, thus they are faster. And whereas in public institutions, decisions are more like democratic, like a voting, because and as well decentralized because of academic freedom. Thus decisions and change take longer time. So, but it's very interesting that you say that it's just a slight difference between one and the other.
Yes. It's not a huge difference. So,
Okay.
I think you can definitely have both types of clients. And one other advantage of public, even though it's slightly slower adoption curve, you can start at many places at the same time. So each department or school makes their own decision. So sometimes, we can start a relationship with 3 different schools in a university, so that we are kind of managing the independent relationships because they are going to make the decisions on their own, independently, essentially. So I think, there are some positives and negatives in both approaches. But the fundamental thing what I've seen is that it needs to be there needs to be faculty champions who really like the product, the value, and there needs to be student champions who really like it, and then that kind of drives the administrators to kind of start to kind of conversation in terms of kind of getting a deal done or whatnot. So those things start.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I would say everything depends on the leadership as well. If you have people that are on the leadership and the leadership team that are on for change, then things will go right. And it makes sense that in public institutions it happens like this, because since decisions are decentralized, then you have more more diverse options that you find for people that are for change leading that faculty or that program or that, no, right?
That's right. So you have much more entryways into those schools as opposed to for profits, which might be just one department or one school.
True. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so taking all of your learning, all these things that you have told me, and the story that you have shared with us, what would be your ideas or thoughts on how to improve this relationship between higher education institutions and entrepreneurs, especially the ones that want to work with that want to work in higher education and in the field of higher education?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think that goes to the heart of how innovation can happen in this space. Because historically, if you look at higher education, it was very self-sufficient. right? Every school was had their own faculties, their tenure systems, their administration, their own recruitment efforts, and students will come from the local geography, where they almost had a kind of every year students will show up, and that's how it'll work. And now what's happening is student competition is going up, so there's going to be more competition between schools, especially we move online, and schools are using more technology and more other services to be relevant in this new world, which is hybrid and online and residential, kind of all mixed together. What we call is hybrid learning. Essentially, that's kind of the future we are heading to. So no institution can do it or do on its own. It's just impossible, because even if they do everything on their own, everything would not be of the highest quality, because the amount of investment you have to do to get everything right is going to be very expensive. Like building one product, like imagine if every school had to build their own Zoom platform, right? I mean, Zoom had
Never.
spent hundreds of
Maybe,
millions of dollars, right? And
yes.
best engineers in the world, and they attract the right research scientists to kind of do so many things so that it works seamlessly. Or Google Meet that we're using now. So technology has this very unique feature, which is, especially technology, is that once you
Scalable.
build it, yeah,
Yeah.
you can scale it infinitely, and you can really customize it infinitely. So it's important for universities to kind of really identify what they want to build in-house and what they want to work with other partners. Could be technology companies, could be other type of providers. And the key in this partnership, which I think is we are getting in that direction, is that a very kind of a tight alignment on the final objective, which is student experience, student outcomes, student success at the end of the day, right? So if that outcomes are clear and both parties come together and both align the relationship towards that outcome, we see results happen. And when results do not happen is when the incentives are very misaligned, where they don't trust each other, they don't treat each other well, and they all think that this is just a transactional relationship, which can happen sometimes with technology providers too, where they're not committed to do the work, what it takes. So my central thesis is that I think it's important for universities and companies like us to actually kind of come together with a very clear alignment. And alignment is around outcomes, define the outcomes together,
Mhm.
and then work together to get those outcomes. And everything should be based on those relationships, so that it's kind of set up in a win-win way. If it works, both party wins. If it doesn't work, there is no winner. Like essentially, the relationship doesn't go forward. So it's kind of really we need that more discussion, because I do see that some institutions are moving faster than others. It requires some change around how technology vendors like us are managed, or any
Mhm.
consulting vendors, how they're managed. So there needs to be an alignment at the highest level possible. There needs to be discussions around, what are the outcomes and things like that. So my thing is that that's happening. So the good news is that that's happening. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be overnight, but I think hopefully in the next 5 years, I expect to see a lot of kind of improvement or progress in this area.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree on with you on that, and I would also say that there needs to be more bridges, no, more people that are bridging the path between higher education institutions and entrepreneurs on higher education. No, I think, I mean, from my experience, I've seen that. Uh, it's almost an enigma for higher education professionals how to relate with the industry and how to relate with entrepreneurs, because as you said before, sometimes they don't speak the same language, sometimes they don't have the same objective. So yeah, if you don't have the same objectives or the same goal, yeah, you don't, communication is rather difficult, no? So I think there first need to be like these people that are the bridge builders.
Yes, no, 100%. I think there has to be trust, and there has to be good examples, and partnerships that actually work in the right reasons. It's the challenge is that higher education has not done it before. Like a lot of schools we work with, they have not really worked with vendors like us in the
Hmm.
past, right? So a lot of the initial conversations is to educating them how we like to work and what would be the best outcome, so that they know that this is possible, and then we engage into a relationship. There are universities that have done this for some time now because they have been working in various online and other universities, So there is this learning curve we all have to go together. And I think we just have to make sure that we understand each other, because I think each party comes with its own, biases or ways of viewing the world. I think we just have to sit together and kind of have more conversations and see if we can deliver results for the students, because I think that's what matters at the end of the day.
Definitely. It's so funny how at the end it all comes out to communication and curiosity, right? Like there needs to be curiosity on the one side to learn from the other side, and the same the other way. And there needs to be communication, and sometimes I think we as people take communication for granted because this is something that we do every day, all day. But it's not something that comes naturally oftentimes, especially in this case, especially among different worlds. So yeah, I think that definitely there needs to be more like a different view on communication, and like there's something that I call like intentional communication, no, just towards an objective, and in this case, it's building the relationship.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think communication is it's a word we often use, but I think this truly needs really good communication, on both sides. And the one last thing I'll say is this, that, a very positive note for everybody involved in education and higher education and edtech broadly is that the size of the opportunity is enormous. So just kind of, statistically, I was looking at some numbers, like right now, if you add up all the tuition that gets paid, in any sort of like undergrad, grad, or higher education context, is like more than $1 trillion that is being spent. Like,
wow,
it's a huge spend, right? If you think about families, how much they're spending for their kids' education, adult professionals are spending for their own education or reskilling and anything else, companies that are spending to kind of train their employees, is an enormous amount of money being spent. And out of that, I think right about 3 to 3.5% is being spent in technology right now, which is, roughly like, 3% of $1 trillion, or like 30 billion or something in that range worldwide. So that's a small number actually, given where technology, like we live lives around technology, but higher education is spending very small amount in technology. And that number is just going to grow because we are going to live in a much more hybrid, much more experiential experience where online and offline are going to all blend together, and there's so much innovation happening. So if you look at a 10-year horizon, roughly speaking, you can easily see that percentage going from 3% to 10%. That would be pretty conservative. 10% of the overall spend is in technology or related to technology. And that's going to unlock hundreds of billions of dollars of market opportunity. So if you are an entrepreneur, or if you are an educator, or if you're somebody who is excited about innovation in higher education, being able to figure out a path to play in that market shift is probably a really big opportunity coming in the next 10 years. It's been tough. It's not easy, but nothing is easy, right? So
yeah, good things are not easy. Good things take effort.
Exactly. So I think there's
great
a lot
reward,
of
great effort.
Even from a financial point of view.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. Well, Shaunak, this is actually a very interesting topic for maybe a next episode. We can talk about the forecast of higher education expenditure and the opportunities for markets in higher education. This is something that I would be up for. But for now, let's close this interview here. I don't know if you have any parting words. Where can people find you? Where can people know more about you and your product?
Yeah, so in terms of finding me, the best is, I would say, LinkedIn. If you use LinkedIn, you can just search my name there, Shaunak Roy. You should find me, and please reach out if you would like to chat or know more. In terms of the company, it's Yellowdig. Name of the company is Yellowdig, and the website is yellowdig.co. You can search in Google, you'll find us there. And yeah, through there are many case studies, many examples. If you're interested in higher education or K-12 or corporate training, we have many examples there. And you can also reach out to us through the website.
Great. I will anyways link your profile and your company's website in this episode so that people can go there and see all the things that you're doing. It has been great to have you here, and really looking forward to keep discussing this topic that I can see from the beginning that we are both passionate about. Now, so this is goodbye. And then I guess see you on the next episode of the Innovation in Higher Education podcast.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
no, thank you so much, Viviana. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and good luck with everything.
Same. Thank you for listening to the Innovation in Higher Education podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter to not miss any episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as @Innovation in Higher Ed. Cheers!